Traditionally, Guardians have gained their powers from the Traveler and its light, but nowadays the Darkness is competing for our attention. The Darkness has given Hunters unprecedented mobility, and the Titan's might and physicality has been taken to new levels. But what about the Warlock? What has the Darkness done for our space magic? Destiny 2's Beyond Light expansion brought with it 3 new subclass branches, the Revenant Hunter, Behemoth Titan, and Shadebinder Warlock. In the final part of this 3-part video series, I'll be showcasing my first build for the Shadebinder. If you missed any of the previous videos, you can check the link in the top right now. With that said, let's get started. Just like always, before we dive into the build, we're going to break down the Shadebinder's abilities. Its melee is Penumbral Blast. It's a ranged attack that instantly freezes targets within its area of effect. Your super is Winter's Wrath. While this roaming super is active, your light attacks send out multiple bolts of ice that track targets and freeze them, and your heavy attack releases the shockwave that deals high damage to frozen targets and instantly shatters them. Just like with the previous Stasis subclasses, the base 2 abilities aren't enough to make something complete, so now we have to turn our attention to the aspects. First up, we have Ice Flare Bolts. Shattering a frozen target spawns 2 Seekers that track and freeze other enemies. This allows slotting 3 fragments. Frost Pulse is the next aspect, and it adds a shockwave to your Rift activation that freezes all enemies in its radius. Frost Pulse allows you to slot 1 additional fragment. The Shadebinder and its currently available aspects give you a lot of room to play with fragments, so I'm going to slot them first, then build around them. The Warlock's Rift has always been an important part of its gameplay, and the Frost Pulse ability adds even more value to it. Whisper of Refractions is a great first choice. Defeating slowed or frozen targets reduces the cooldown of our class ability. Next, since I'll be able to freeze targets with all 3 of my abilities, I'll be able to keep a high uptime with Whisper of Hedrons. You gain a weapon damage buff after freezing an enemy. Again, since I'll be freezing targets often, I want to get more value out of that. Whisper of Bonds grants bonus super energy after killing a frozen enemy with a weapon. The final slot will be for Whisper of Fissures to increase the size and damage of our shatter explosions. Okay, now that we've got our fragments locked in, we've got to decide on a direction for the rest of our build, and for me, my goal is to increase my ability uptime as much as possible across all my abilities. The simplest way to do that is with the Eye of Another World Exotic Helmet. Its exotic perk reduces the cooldown of all your abilities and highlights enemies. The cooldown reduction provided by Eye of Another World is roughly equivalent to adding 2 tiers of extra stat points to all relevant stats. Moving from there, I have to tailor my armor and its mods towards cooldown reduction for my abilities. Most of my current best equipment has a lean towards strength, so I'm going to focus my mods on increasing that stat, and for my combat mods, I want to improve my melee uptime even more with heavy-handed. While charged with light, using a melee ability refunds 50% of the cooldown. This means when I play correctly, my Penumbral Blast cooldown will be a little bit less than 20 seconds. For the rest of my combat mods, I have Taking Charge, Charge Harvester, Stacks on Stacks, and Radiant Light for the extra strength. From there, I could add more ways to speed up my melee cooldown, but for a more well-rounded build, I'll be slotting Focusing Strike in my gloves, melee hits reduce the cooldown of my class ability, and Special Finisher in my class item. Finishers cost 1/3 of my super energy, but they generate special ammo. My overall game plan isn't too complicated. I want to freeze every single enemy that I come into contact with, but making it all work together is a bit tricky, so we're going to head out into the field and talk more about the build. Okay, just like we've been doing for the previous 2 videos in the series, we're going to start out with a lost sector on the moon, so I can talk about the different mechanics in the build without getting completely obliterated. Then we're going to go into some more difficult content so we can see what this setup can really do. Okay, here we go. The main thing that I've found very important for this setup and the Shadebinder in general is that patience is rewarded tremendously. And the reason is because of all the different things that I have in my kit that gain different benefits from initiating specific actions, specifically freezing a target or killing a frozen target. So whenever I have the opportunity to freeze something, I don't want to kill it until I freeze it. So if I create an Ice Flare Bolt, even if I have a clean shot, I'm going to wait for that Ice Flare Bolt to get where it needs to go to freeze an enemy before I pull the trigger. So as soon as I get my grenade available again, I'm going to throw it out, and you're going to see the patience at work. Throw that thing out, and I'm waiting for those ice flare bolts to find something and freeze it before I shoot the enemies in the face. It's very important to do this to get the most out of all of your fragments. We're getting the Whisper of Hedrons whenever we freeze something, but we're also getting that bonus super energy from Whisper of Bonds whenever we kill something specifically with our weapons that has been frozen. Another thing that I've been finding that's important with this setup is that it works better the higher difficulty the content is, because in lower difficulty environments your abilities tend to one-shot things, so the Penumbral Blast melee, it's going to outright kill enemies instead of freezing them. And what I want to do is freeze something, take out my Ariana's Vow, shoot it in the face, get a kill. Or kill it with my scout rifle or my sword or whatever. But what I'm trying to do primarily is get kills on frozen enemies with my weapons. And also you can see pretty clearly that it's very easy to get my cooldowns back if I do things in the correct order. If I freeze a target and kill that target, I'm getting cooldown reduction on my Rift. If I hit something with my melee, then I'm also getting cooldown reduction with my Rift. And because my melee is freezing enemies, it's like I'm double dipping a little bit. There's a lot of stuff going on that's helping me keep the freeze uptime as high as possible. But that's also giving me the higher uptime on the damage boost effect from Whisper of Hedron. So it's a really nice system that we got going here. Okay, for step 2 in the process, we are going to head into the Bunker E15 Legend Lost Sector. So we're going to have to deal with champions this time, as well as some other modifiers. But we're also going to get to see how my abilities can function in a higher difficulty environment. So let's get in there. Alright, here we go. I cleared out the first room in the Lost Sector without much issue, but moving forward, we're going to see a very different style of play with the Shadebinder when compared to the Behemoth and the Revenant. I find that the Shadebinder is a lot less explosive and bursty than the Behemoth and the Revenant. And it's more about having a very good, consistent experience as opposed to destroying a bunch of crystals in one fell swoop. It's more about slowly, methodically moving through an environment. And we're going to see that with Penumbral Blast, especially in those Ice Flare bolts. So we freeze a single target, and that freeze is going to chain from target to target, provided the Ice Flare bolts don't go somewhere completely random, and that is all going to fuel my super energy. So as that Ice Flare bolt travels around, looks for another target, I'm waiting for the freeze to go out, and then I fire, the shatter damage goes out, and I get all of the different benefits that I'm getting as a part of my kit. I'm getting the weapon damage bonuses, I'm getting the super energy, I'm getting the class ability cooldown reduction. There's a lot of stuff going on every time I kill a frozen target or anytime I just freeze something. So really, it's all about methodically going through the environments as opposed to bursting things down in one massive attack. Like right there, the Ice Flare bolt went around the corner and froze the champion. In order to approach this champion a little easier, I can send out a freeze from the Penumbral Blast and then run up and hit him with the sword, and then we'll finish him off with the Ariana's Vow. It's a very smooth, methodical playstyle, and I enjoy it tremendously. And the melee ability is acting as pretty much a gateway to my other abilities. When I hit something with that, it's going to reduce the cooldown for my Rift. Then the freeze comes out, provided it doesn't kind of act all goofy and have weird tracking. Uh-oh. Let's throw down another grenade to get the freeze on that guy, and then we'll try to chop him up. The last thing that we're going to do for the setup is head into the Empire Hunt for the Dark Priestess at the Legend difficulty. So again, we're going to have to fight against champions as well as some other modifiers. Alright, just like what we were doing with the Legend Lost Sector, I'm going to be very deliberate about when I use my abilities and when I pull the trigger, because I want to get the most out of my abilities. I'm taking a lot of damage, so I'm going to use my Rift there as if it were a traditional Rift. I'm not going to worry about trying to freeze anything with it. And that prioritization is going to be very important for us, because the Shadebinder does not have any health sustain in its kit. So there are going to be plenty of times when I'm going to have to use my defensive ability or my supporting ability, namely the Rift, as it is originally intended to use, instead of running up to enemies and dropping it like a big freeze bomb on a large group of targets. Now that I do have my Rift available, I can potentially drop it on some enemies. So why don't we start off like that? And just drop it on those guys and take them out. I know there's a Minotaur nearby. Oh, he's frozen. I was wondering why he wasn't trying to slap me in the face. Alright, now that we've taken out the Minotaur, let's loop around behind these guys while they're distracted by the Fallen. This is a war on two fronts for these enemies. So now we can make some use of the Ice Flare bolts. We'll chain it between enemies, and there it is going to hit the Wyvern, which is awesome. So now I can chop him up without worrying too much about his firepower. We're going to send out the Rift to freeze him one more time. The Ice Flare bolts are actually going to freeze those guys, so I didn't need to throw my grenade out. These boys are spawning behind me, but that's not a big deal because I have my super, so I can send it out and get some pretty good damage. Alright, we cleared out pretty much everything except for the champion, of course. We got some more guys spawning, so I want to get them frozen before I kill them for the bonus super energy. This next area, we're going to get a huge amount of super energy because there's going to be a lot of guys that we can chain some freezes on. So we'll start off with the melee, and then we'll use that fallen guillotine. We'll throw out the grenade. Oh no, it went to the wrong spot. It didn't chase after the enemies correctly because of the terrain. But I can use my Rift, and then we'll kill them just the same. The Ice Flare bolts chasing after those guys pretty effectively. And you can see the effects of the Whisper of Bonds working wonders for us. I'm going to drop my Rift on these guys, and then I'm going to turn my attention to this boy over here. Now we can turn back to the main threat, this barrier champion. I want to fight him from cover. Oh, hello, friend. I didn't know you wanted to play so soon. Alright, let's throw out a grenade. Get him frozen. He's going to put up his barrier again. And what the hell, let's get some special ammo. I almost have my super again because of all the freezing, even after having just spent a bunch of super energy on getting some extra special ammo. Also, there is another champion across the way, and my anti-barrier weapon uses special ammo, so it's probably for the better that I got that extra ammo, just so I could deal with this guy, and if I miss any precision hits, then it's not a big deal. And there it is, man. Our ability uptime with this setup is pretty incredible. Our melee is our most frequently used ability because of heavy-handed and our very high strength statistic. And there it is, man. That is going to be the setup. Our ability uptime is incredibly high, with the melee ability being our most frequently used ability, but the Rift isn't too far behind, because you got to remember, every time we kill a frozen enemy, that's reducing the cooldown of our Rift, and we've also got Focusing Strike on our gloves for whenever we hit something with our melee or a melee ability, that is also reducing that Rift cooldown. So there's a lot of synergy going on between those two abilities. The grenade doesn't have any special interactions going on, but the Eye of Another World is still working in the background to give us some extra cooldown reduction on that. So it feels really nice. With all of that said, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support the channel more than you already do just by watching, liking, subscribing, and commenting, you can head over to patreon.com/iBluairJgR to become a patron. Over there, you can check out bonus videos where I go over the creative process for making these videos and give a lot of behind-the-scenes information about how the sausage is made. As always, the name of the game is Destiny 2. The name of the channel is iBluairJgR. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.